And I remember having a hard time putting the key in the door to the house because my hand was just shaking like crazy. And I was so desperate to get to a phone to try to call Frank.
20 years after 9/11, Montrealer Kimmy Chedel still vividly remembers the moment she learned the Twin Towers were hit while at home in New Jersey. Her 39-year-old husband, Frank Doyle, born in Detroit, had been working at the World Trade Center South Tower. He was head of the equity trading desk for Keefe, Bruyette and Woods. On that fateful day, Kimmy was able to get in touch with her husband after the first plane hit the North Tower at 8:46 a.m.
I was just so relieved that he was able to pick up the phone. I could hear his voice. And he said to me right away, he says, if you think we got rocked in 93, he said, this was 10 times worse. Because in 1993, we both lived through the World Trade Center bombing. And he said that they were knocked right out of their seats onto the floor when the plane hit the other building.
Kimmy urged Frank to leave, but he stayed put and asked her to call his mother in Michigan and her mother in Quebec to reassure them he was okay.
As I was speaking with my mother, telling her that he was okay, I had call waiting from my close friend who lived in Englewood. And she said, Kimmy, I don't know if you're watching the news. And she said Frankie's building was just hit.
That was at 9:03 a.m. United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into floors 77 through 85 of the South Tower. Kimmy says she then tried nonstop to get through to Frank's cell phone.
And at 9:22, the phone rang and I picked up and it was Frank. And he was very calm. And he said, I need you to listen to me carefully. He says, I've been up to the rooftop and the rooftop doors are locked. He says, we're trapped on the 87th floor and it's getting difficult to breathe. And I could hear lots of voices. I could hear, shuffling and coughing. I could hear the glass breaking. I assumed that it was for a fire extinguisher. And he said, I know you know this, but I love you, sweetie. And I need you to promise me to tell Zoe and Garrett every day for the rest of their life how much their papa loves them. He says, but right now I need your help and you need to call 911 and you need to tell them that we're trapped on the 87th floor. And he said, I love you. And then he hung up. And I didn't realize that that would be our last call.
Kimmy and Frank's children, Zoe and Garrett, were 2 and 1 at the time of the 9/11 attacks.
I was in the living room holding Zoe and our friend Sandy was holding Garrett. And we're watching the TV and his building was on fire. The first building was on fire. And we were actually watching the screen live when the building collapsed at 9:59, when his building was the second to get hit, but the first to go down.
A month after 9/11, Kimmy and the kids packed up and moved to the family cottage in Saint-Sauveur, Quebec, to be closer to loved ones and escape the realities of living so close to ground zero. It wasn't until late October that Frank's remains were identified, Kimmy getting a call on Halloween. The family eventually put down roots in Montreal, where Zoe and Garrett grew up. They're now 22 and 21 years old.
We both study international relations and geopolitics. So we've learned so much more about 9/11 and its effects. So not just our little bubble in our family, but the greater world impacts. And it's kind of surreal that it's been 20 years.
It was a huge event that rocked the world, not even just the United States, but geopolitical events went into motion all over the place. Everybody was impacted by 9/11 in some way or another.
Kimmy and her family just wanting to keep Frank's memory alive and tell their story of how September 11th, 2001 changed their lives forever.
As painful as it is, it makes me feel close to Frank. And I love the fact that we get to talk about him and honor him.
In Montreal, Alyssia Rubertucci, City News.